Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv, is coming under near constant bombardment as Russia presses ahead with a new offensive. Kyiv has accused Russia of targeting civilians after a wave of Russian drone and missile strikes swept across the region. Moscow has consistently denied targeting civilians deliberately, but many are coming under fire regardless.
Two children were playing here when a guided aerial bomb hit this private yard in central Kharkiv. Now officials are assessing the damage, while the father is being treated by paramedics, his wife and two children all in hospital. Strikes like this one have been hitting Ukraine's second-largest city daily, as Russia continues its offensive in the northeast. For some, there's been no respite from weeks of attacks. It's the second airstrike on this woman's house.
Let me know where you want
It's exactly the same place as the last hit. It was Easter 2022. The Russians were shelling Kharkiv then. I've just finished restoring the house myself. Now I don't know what to do.
Tens of thousands have already been evacuated from Kharkiv region, but some remain in defiance of the Russian onslaught.
I was eating in the kitchen and went to another room to drink coffee. I heard an explosion, I didn't know where. Plaster and glass were flying everywhere. Then there was another explosion. I was scared and wanted to run away, but I didn't know where to go or what to do.
More Kharkiv residents may soon have to decide whether to stay on. As Russia captures more villages in the area, it is feared that nowhere will be safe for civilians.
Well, and for some analysis on that, let's bring in Marina Miron from the War Studies Department at King's College in London. Good to have you with us. Now, we know Ukrainian prosecutors have opened an investigation into possible war crimes in Kharkiv and Vovchansk. But are we talking about war crimes? Is that what we're seeing here?
Good morning, Monica. Well, we have to be very, very careful when we're looking at incidents like this, because we have seen that throughout the war. It takes time to actually establish what it was. And a day after such attacks, it's virtually impossible to reach a conclusive decision. And the laws of war obviously prohibit intentional targeting of civilians. Now, there is also the possibility of collateral damage, and I think it's a very important distinction which has to be kept in mind here. Therefore, it's very early to jump to conclusions, specifically because we've seen it throughout the war. The Russians have been accusing Ukrainians of the same in Belgorod. The Ukrainian side has been accusing the Russians. Yes, there will be war crimes as in any war, and that is an unfortunate reality, but they have to be distinguished from collateral damage, and they have to be investigated properly. And that takes years. It's not a matter of 2-3 days or even weeks.
Now, let's take a look at the front line, because Volodymyr Zelensky reported some success by Ukrainian troops fighting the renewed Russian assault in the Kharkiv region. What more do you know about that?
Well, it seems like the assault is not progressing as fast as it was last week. So the Russians would have to cross the Vovcha River, which is dividing Vovchansk. And they are obviously attempting to isolate Vovchansk from the east. So in that direction, there seems to be much less activity than in other directions, but we have to be very careful and look at the entire line of contact and what is happening there. And I'm specifically referring to the Kupiansk region and to Belohorivka, where the Russians are seeming to make advances. It's still too early to tell. They're also active around Ocheretine and in Chasiv Yar. Zaporizhia, Robotine is another important direction for the Russians. So we have to look at the complete picture, and it seems that Vovchansk for now seems to be a little bit calmer. How that will evolve will depend on how well the Ukrainian forces can defend against the Russians.
And that exactly brings us to the next point, because we know that Ukraine is struggling with a lack of equipment, lack of weapons. And now a study shows that there is another restriction that could hamper Ukraine's defense ability, namely restrictions in the way weapons provided by Western allies can be used. Could you explain that to us?
Well, there have been concerns, and these concerns are not new, and they are related to the whole aid that has been supplied to Ukraine by Western countries, namely the fact that Ukraine shouldn't use those weapons to strike Russia proper. And that has been a problem. Ukraine has also been criticized for using drones to strike Russian oil refineries, for instance. And it is a legitimate military target from the Ukrainian point of view, of course. However, there are even restrictions being placed on that, something that Ukraine in this situation could take advantage of potentially. And so restricting Ukraine from, let's say, striking across the border where Russian groupings of troops are preparing for renewed assaults is, of course, hampering Ukraine's capabilities. And if we put it into the whole picture where Ukraine is already struggling with manpower, with shortage of technology, restricting Ukraine in that way it is, of course, very significant for Ukraine's ability to defend itself, because the Russians can use those territories without any fear of being attacked by Ukrainian forces.
All right. Marina Miron from the War Studies Department at King's College London. As ever, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.